The air over Moscow felt different this time, heavier, quieter, almost like the moment before a storm when the wind stops and the sky holds its breath. Ordinary Russians sensed something was wrong long before their leaders admitted it. Store shelves looked the same, the news anchors repeated the same slogans, and propaganda still blasted about victory and strength. But refrigerators were emptier, fuel lines were longer, rumors were louder. And then it happened. The truth Vladimir Putin had tried to bury finally clawed its way to the surface. Russia was standing on the edge of a financial abyss. That revelation didn't leak from a Western agency, a dissident politician, or a hostile foreign capital. It came from inside the Kremlin itself. Behind closed doors, in a meeting so secret that only fragments escaped into Western media, Russia's top economic minds told Putin something he never expected to hear. They told him the Russian economy was overheating, they told him the brakes had failed, and they warned him that the engine was about to explode. Inside that room were the two people Putin relied on more than anyone else when it came to keeping the economy alive: Sberbank CEO Herman Gref and central bank governor Elvira Nabiullina. For years, these technocrats worked like paramedics, keeping a critically wounded body alive, adjusting interest rates, moving reserves, patching up leaks, and trying to hold back the tidal wave of sanctions. But now even they had run out of illusions. The money was gone, the credit channels were cut, and the last pressure valve left in the entire system had just slammed shut. That valve was Citibank, the final major Western financial institution still operating inside Russia. For months, it was the only bridge Russia had left to the global financial system. When SWIFT cut access, when JP Morgan and HSBC withdrew, when European banks unplugged themselves, Citibank remained as a thin but crucial artery. Russian companies used it to receive payments from abroad, buy spare parts, move dollars, and maintain even the faintest connection to the outside world. But now that artery had been cut, permanently, irreversibly. When news broke of Citibank's complete exit, Russian officials tried to pretend it was routine. But the public didn't believe a word. Within hours, bank lobbies flooded with people, not to save their money, but to get rid of it, to convert it into cash before the ruble collapsed again. Videos leaked from Moscow and St. Petersburg showed crowds trampling over each other, pushing, shouting, forcing their way toward ATMs. Anyone watching could see the panic in their eyes. They didn't trust the banks. They didn't trust the government. They didn't trust the future. And for good reason. Deposits inside Russia's banking system, the savings of ordinary families, had collapsed 150-fold since the start of the war. Think about what that means. It means the middle class is disappearing. It means savings have evaporated. It means people don't believe their money will exist tomorrow. The backbone of any stable society, the trust in its currency, is fracturing. That's why only 7 out of every 100 Russians are willing to lock their money into long-term accounts. Everyone else is sprinting toward the exit. When the Kremlin's technocrats told Putin the truth, they weren't exaggerating. They were describing a nation in freefall. But Putin didn't change course. He didn't announce reforms or emergency measures. He didn't negotiate peace. Instead, he reached for the one tool every mafia state eventually uses: force. He threatened Citibank and pressured it into transferring its remaining assets to Kremlin-loyal oligarchs. Overnight, the Russian financial system transformed from a partially functional economy into a shadow structure resembling North Korea. Closed, opaque, unpredictable, and dominated by clans rather than laws. This is how an economy starts eating itself from the inside. First, the banks panic, then the industries collapse. And then the population starts to feel the hunger. That second phase, the industrial collapse, is now underway. Putin's propaganda machine still screams that unemployment is at historic lows, that factories are running at full speed, that Russian industry is stronger than ever. But the truth is far darker. The government has ordered factory bosses not to fire anyone, not because business is healthy, but because the statistics must remain beautiful. So workers are being labeled employed on paper while sitting at home with no salary, no insurance, and no way to survive. These people have a name inside Kremlin documents: hidden unemployed. There are officially 254,000 of them, but everyone knows the real number is far higher. Millions of undocumented migrants aren't included. Millions more remain invisible inside small factories that haven't reported the truth. This crisis has grown by 250% in a single year. But the most shocking part is where this collapse is hitting. Not restaurants, not tourism, not entertainment. It is hitting the core of Russia's war machine, the massive Uralvagonzavod factory, the primary producer of Russian tanks, including the T-90 sent to the Ukrainian front. Logically, in the middle of the largest land war of the century, this factory should be operating day and night. Instead, it is laying off 10% of its workers, slashing some departments by 50%, and freezing all new hires. Russia's flagship arms factory, the symbol of its ability to wage war, is running out of cash. This is what economists call industrial cannibalism. When a country diverts all resources toward war, eventually the civilian economy collapses. And when the civilian economy collapses, the military collapses right afterward. The war economy starts eating itself. It becomes a snake swallowing its own tail. That is exactly what is happening across Russia. And just as the financial and industrial systems started to buckle, another blow landed. Not economic, but physical. Ukrainian military intelligence, working with Russian resistance groups, launched a series of sabotage operations targeting the infrastructure that fuels Moscow itself. The most symbolic strike was on the ring-shaped Orsk-Moscow oil pipeline, a lifeline that encircles the capital and supplies fuel to its military garrisons and civilian population. The explosion created a fireball that lit up the sky outside Moscow. But the real shock wasn't the flames, it was the location. The pipeline is inside one of the most heavily defended regions in the entire Russian Federation, surrounded by surveillance, radars, and air defense batteries. And yet saboteurs walked right into the Kremlin's backyard and blew it up. Then came the strikes on fuel depots near Mytishki. Then the burning of fuel-loaded railway cars in the Perm region. Then the derailments. Then the fires. One by one, the arteries feeding fuel into Moscow began to collapse. And because Western banks like Citibank are gone, Russia has no access to the high-tech replacement parts needed to repair these systems. Valves, pumps, sensors, control modules, all of them came from abroad. Now Russian engineers are trying to hold the system together with improvised parts from China that barely fit, malfunction under pressure, and break under winter temperatures. The Kremlin can lie about inflation, it can hide unemployment, it can fabricate factory data, but it cannot hide an exploding pipeline, and it cannot hide what comes next. Winter. Energy shortages, power outages, fuel rationing, long lines at gas stations in one of the world's largest oil-producing nations. This is the kind of irony history remembers forever, a petro-state forced into scarcity. But perhaps the most devastating blow is not the economic crash or the industrial breakdown or even the sabotage of Moscow's energy lifelines. The most devastating blow is biological. Russians are now eating less, not symbolically, literally. Milk consumption has dropped 8%. Rice, the cheapest way to fill a child's stomach, has dropped 10%. Households are cutting meals, skipping proteins, and buying cheaper substitutes. The refrigerator has become the final battlefield where Russia is losing the war against its own policies. It's the place where propaganda cannot compete. Because when a mother opens the fridge and sees nothing inside, the television on the wall cannot convince her everything is fine. Putin's social contract, obedience in exchange for stability, has collapsed. The Kremlin promised pride and empire. In return, it has delivered poverty and hunger. Even Elvira Nabiullina, normally careful and guarded, admitted that interest rates will remain painfully high until at least 2026. Translated into reality, that means years of expensive loans, collapsing industries, dying businesses, and disappearing savings. The winter Russia is entering is not seasonal, it is structural. The door that once connected Russia to the outside world is closed. The money has dried up. The tanks cannot be produced. The pipelines cannot be protected, and the refrigerators cannot be filled. Yet the propaganda will continue. The victory songs will still play. The presenters will still smile. But history is merciless, and economics is even more so. In every showdown between the television and the refrigerator wins. Always. Quietly. Without threat. Without violence. It simply tells the truth that the government refuses to say. And today, that refrigerator in Russia is emptier than at any time in modern history. This is not just a recession. This is a dismantling of a nation's economic DNA, piece by piece, factory by factory, family by family. And sooner or later, even the Kremlin will feel the cold. Before you go, remember, we're completely independent. No big networks, no sponsors, and no government influence. In a world full of corruption and scripted news, your support keeps real journalism alive. So please like, share, and subscribe. It truly helps.